Welcome to Prism Rounds, the audio journal club where we break down one study at a time for ICU, ED, and pulmonary/critical care teams, physicians, trainees, nurses, pharmacists, and respiratory therapists. A quick note before we start, this episode is created using AI-generated voices. I originally made these episodes to support my own learning and review, and I'm sharing them publicly in case they're helpful to other busy clinicians and learners. Because the voices are synthetic, you may occasionally hear mispronunciations of medical terms, drug names, or author names. Thanks in advance for your patience. Everything you'll hear is for education only and not medical advice. Let's get into today's paper.
All right, let's set the scene for you. It is currently 0300 hours, 3 a.m., and the hospital hallways have finally settled into that deceptive, heavy silence.
Oh, yeah, the 3 a.m. silence.
Right, the kind that makes the hair on the back of your neck stand up because you know exactly how fragile it is. I mean, the floors are waxed, they're shining under those harsh fluorescents, and you can literally hear the hum of the compressor on the vending machine all the way down from the nurse's station. It is quiet out there.
But inside the unit.
Inside the unit, it is a completely different story. Inside the rooms, it is...
It's the symphony.
Yes.
The usual chaotic symphony of the intensive care unit.
Exactly. You've got the infusion pumps nagging you because a bag is running low. You've got the telemetry monitors chirping every single time a patient moves and a lead gets loose. And then underpinning it all, you have the rhythm section of our lives. The whoosh click of the mechanical ventilators.
You know, at 3 a.m., that rhythm is really a double-edged sword.
How?
Well, on one hand, it is the most comforting sound in the entire world because it means the patient is breathing, technology is keeping them alive. But on the other hand, it is the most frustrating sound imaginable because it means they are still stuck on the machine.
That is exactly the mood right now. I am currently operating on a fuel mixture that is roughly 70% stale break room coffee, which, by the way, I strongly suspect has been sitting in that pot since the day shift left yesterday.
I wouldn't touch that.
I have to. It's that and 30% sheer willpower. But you know, I'm looking at the board. I'm looking at bed 4, bed 7, bed 9. And the question for you and me tonight is always the same. How do we liberate them?
Right.
How do we get that plastic tube out of their trachea safely, efficiently, and permanently?
Liberation. It is such a loaded word in critical care, isn't it?
It really is.
It implies a struggle, a jailbreak almost.
It is a jailbreak. We are fighting biology, we are fighting deconditioning, and sometimes, frankly, we are fighting the equipment itself. So tonight we are going to look at that fight through the lens of a massive new piece of research. We are doing a deep dive into the PROMIZING trial. That is PROMIZING with a Z, which just dropped in the NEJM.
This is the heavyweight title fight that respiratory therapists and intensivists have been waiting for. I mean, this isn't just another small pilot study.
No, definitely.
This is a head-to-head battle. In one corner, we have the old, reliable, the mode we all basically grew up with, pressure support ventilation, or PSV.
The Toyota Camry of ventilator modes.
Exactly.
It gets you there. It's not flashy, but it just works.
It works. And in the other corner, we have the high-tech challenger, the smart tech, the algorithm-driven future. Proportional assist ventilation with load-adjustable gain factors, better known as PAV+.
The Tesla autopilot of breathing, or maybe like a bionic exoskeleton.
I love that. A perfect analogy. So the core conflict here for you listening is simple, but the implications are huge. Does the fancy, expensive, physiologically elegant algorithm actually beat the standard of care? Does the smart machine get patients off the ventilator faster than the dumb machine?
I love that setup. Because as an attending, I am always skeptical of the quote-unquote next big thing.
Right, you've seen it all.
I've seen a lot of fancy gadgets come through the unit that just end up gathering dust in the equipment room because nobody knows how to use them at 3 in the morning. So is PIV Plus just a more expensive way to watch a lung expand, or does it actually change clinical outcomes?
That is exactly what we are going to unpack. And just a quick disclaimer before we get into the weeds here, and we are going to get deep into the weeds today.
Oh, yeah.
We are diving into this data for educational purposes. This is an analysis of a clinical trial. It is not medical advice. If you are standing at a bedside right now listening to this, please listen to your respiratory therapist.
Yes, absolutely.
The RT standing next to you knows way more about that specific patient's lung mechanics than we ever could through a deep dive.
Amen to that. Shout out to the RTs out there. They are the real MVPs of the night shift. Okay, so let's get into the contenders. Before we judge the fight, we really need to understand the fighters. We need a physiology review. Let's start with the defender. Pressure support ventilation, PSV. Walk us through it. What is the machine actually doing?
So PSV is what we call a static assist mode. It is the universal remote of the ICU. If you walk into literally any unit from Tokyo to Toronto, you will find a patient on pressure support.
Yeah, but it's everywhere.
The mechanism is fairly straightforward. You, the clinician, set a pressure level, let's say 10 centimeters of water.
Okay.
Every time the patient triggers a breath, usually by dropping the pressure in the circuit or generating a specific flow, the machine recognizes that effort and delivers that exact push. Boom, 10 of pressure.
It's a square wave. The patient says, I want air, and the machine says, here is 10 pressure.
Correct. And it holds that pressure until the flow drops off, signaling the patient is done inhaling. Then it cycles off. It is reliable. It is consistent. But, and here is the absolute key, it is technically dumb.
Dumb because it has zero situational awareness.
Exactly. The machine doesn't know why you triggered the breath. It doesn't know the context. You could be taking a tiny, shallow breath just to clear your throat. Or you could be septic, acidotic, air hungry and trying to pull a massive tidal volume to blow off CO2.
And it doesn't care.
It doesn't care. The machine gives you 10 centimeters of water regardless of what you actually need in that millisecond.
I always use the analogy of an electric bike with a stuck throttle. Imagine you're on an e-bike where as soon as you touch the pedal, the motor kicks in at exactly 10 miles per hour.
That is a really great way to visualize it.
Right. So if you are on flat ground, 10 miles per hour is fine. It's helpful. But if you are going downhill, 10 miles per hour is terrifying. That is over-assistance. You're spinning your legs, but the bike is doing absolutely everything for you. And if you are climbing a steep grade, 10 miles per hour feels like nothing.
Yeah, you're struggling.
You're pedaling for your life, you're sweating, your heart rate is spiking, and the motor is just leisurely humming along at that same fixed output.
That uphill battle scenario is what we call flow starvation, or under assistance in the vent world. The patient's respiratory drive is high, their demand is high, but the support is totally fixed.
And you can spot that from the doorway.
Oh yeah. This leads to that classic look of the patient using accessory muscles sucking in their neck, just fighting the tube. They are dyspneic because the machine isn't meeting their demand.
And then the downhill scenario, that's just as dangerous, even though it looks really peaceful from the hallway. If the pressure support is set too high, the patient's diaphragm basically clocks out.
Diaphragm atrophy. We know from ultrasound studies, and this data is frankly scary, that ventilator-induced diaphragm dysfunction, or VIDD, creates muscle wasting incredibly fast.
How fast are we talking?
Within 18 to 24 hours of full support, the muscle fibers literally start to shrink. It is use it or lose it on steroids.
So PSV forces us, the clinicians, to be the brain. We have to constantly adjust that pressure support level to keep the patient in the Goldilocks zone. Not too easy, not too hard.
And let's be honest, at 3 a.m., how often are we perfectly tuning that dial minute by minute?
Look, if the blood gas is okay and the patient isn't bucking, we usually leave it alone. We drift. That is the vulnerability of PSV. It relies entirely on human vigilance, which is in short supply on a night shift. Now enter the challenger. PAV+. Proportional assist ventilation. This is the smart mode. Why?
Well, if PSV is the bike with the stuck throttle, PAV Plus is a bionic exoskeleton connected directly to your neural drive. It is fundamentally different math. It relies on the equation of motion.
Oh man, please don't trigger my PTSD from medical school physiology. Pressure vent plus pressure muscle equals...
We have to do it. We have to respect the physics here. The equation of motion states that the pressure required to move air into the lungs equals the flow times resistance plus volume times elastance.
Okay, I'm with you. Resistance is the tube and the airways, right? How tight the pipes are. And elastance is the stiffness of the lung balloon itself, how hard it is to blow up.
Right. Now, in standard modes like PSV, we guess those numbers. We assume we know what the resistance is. In PAV+, the machine actually measures them hundreds of times a second.
Wait, it measures them continuously?
Continuously. Specifically, it performs these micro-occlusions, tiny pauses of about 5 to 10 milliseconds to calculate the compliance and resistance of the patient's respiratory system in real time.
That is wild engineering. It is basically doing a mini pulmonary function test every single breath.
Exactly. Once it knows the resistance and compliance, it calculates exactly how much work the patient is doing.
Yeah.
And this is the proportional part. It amplifies that effort based on a gain setting.
Talk to me about gain, because this is the nom that always confuses people. In PSV, we set pressure. In PAV+, we set gain. What does that actually mean at the bedside?
Think of gain as a volume knob on a microphone, or better yet, a spotter at the gym. If you set the gain to 50%, the ventilator commits to doing exactly 50% of the total work of breathing. The patient does the other 50%.
Okay.
If the patient pulls a little, the vent pushes a little. If the patient pulls hard, really drives that diaphragm because they want a big breath, the vent ramps up instantly and pushes hard right alongside them.
So it perfectly matches the human. It creates synchrony.
That is the physiology promise.
Mhm.
Perfect synchrony, no flow starvation, no over-assistance. If the patient wants to take a sigh, the vent supports the sigh.
And if they fall asleep?
If the patient falls asleep and their drive drops, the vent actually backs off to let the CO2 rise slightly, which stimulates the respiratory drive again. It preserves the natural control loop of the brain.
And the theory is if we preserve that control loop, we get two things. We get safe reconditioning, which is basically gym training for the diaphragm that doesn't cause fatigue. And we get better sleep because the patient isn't fighting the machine all night.
Correct. And if you have a stronger diaphragm and a better rested patient, logically you should be able to extubate them sooner.
It sounds like an absolute slam dunk. In theory, it is the better mousetrap. So the PROMIZING trial asks the question, does this elegant physiological coupling actually translate to getting the patient out of the ICU faster?
Let's look at exactly how they tested it. The study design. We need to look at the filter they used because this is where good research really separates itself from bad research. This was an international multi-center trial, 23 centers across 7 countries. They had to screen a huge number of people.
Give us the numbers on that.
They screened 10,557 patients.
Pause on that number for a second. Over 10,000 patients screened. That is a small city of ventilated patients.
It is, but they only randomized 573.
Whoa, okay, let's unpack that. They screened 10,000 people and excluded 95% of them. Why such a massive filter?
They were looking for the Goldilocks patient. They had to find the sticky patients.
Define sticky for us.
So first, they excluded the people who were simply too sick. Severe neurological issues, people who are likely to die soon, or people on palliation. You can't test a weaning mode on someone who isn't ready to wean at all.
Right.
If the brain isn't working, the mode doesn't matter. PAV Plus requires an intact respiratory drive. If you have Cheyne-Stokes respiration or central apnea, PAV Plus will fail because it amplifies a chaotic signal.
That makes perfect sense.
But the bigger exclusion group was the easy wins. And this is the biggest group in any ICU. A huge chunk of those 10,000 patients were screened, found to be stable, put on a spontaneous breathing trial, and SBT passed it immediately and got extubated.
Ah, I see. So if you are a 25-year-old with a quick overdose or a routine post-op heart, you wake up, you pull the tube, you go home. You do not need PAV+.
Exactly. The PROMIZING trial wasn't interested in them. They wanted the patients in the middle zone, the patients who had been on the vent for a few days, the average was about 5 days actually, who were stable enough to do some work but failed their initial screening or weren't quite ready to fly solo.
The grind. These are the patients who usually sit on the unit for week after week. The COPD exacerbations, the resolving ARDS, the slow-to-wake pneumonia patients. This is exactly where a better mode should shine.
Yes.
If PAV Plus works, it should work for these specific people.
Precisely. So they took these 573 sticky patients and randomized them 1-to-1. Arm A got PAV+. The goal there was to adjust the gain on the ventilator to maintain a normal work of breathing. They measured this by looking at peak muscle pressure targeting 5 to 10 centimeters of water.
So they were tuning the machine to keep the patient in that rigorous gym training zone. Not too easy and not too hard.
Correct. And Arm B got standard PSV. But, and this is important, it wasn't just set it and forget it. They adjusted the pressure support to target a normal respiratory rate between 12 and 35 breaths per minute and a normal tidal volume of 5 to 10 ml per kilogram.
Okay, so both groups are getting active management. This wasn't a trial of smart machine versus neglect. It was smart machine versus attentive clinician.
Exactly.
But there is a secret weapon in this study design that we really need to talk about. The protocol.
This is the detail that changes everything. This wasn't just a comparison of software. Both groups, the fancy PAV Plus group and the standard PSV group, were subject to a strict, standardized weaning protocol.
Tell us what that looked like. Describe ruthless for me.
Every single day, every patient was assessed for SBT readiness. It was a rigorous checklist. If they met the criteria, meaning they were hemodynamically stable and had decent oxygenation, they underwent a spontaneous breathing trial without any support. T-piece or equivalent, sink or swim.
No low-level pressure support. just straight TPs.
Straight TPs.
And
Disconnected from the vent breathing through the tube.
for the listeners who aren't clinical, a T-piece is literally disconnecting the ventilator support entirely and just giving the patient oxygen through a blow-by tube. They are breathing 100% on their own, pulling through the resistance of the endotracheal tube. It is like breathing through a straw while sprinting.
It is the ultimate stress test.
Yeah.
And the protocol said if they pass this for 30 minutes, mandatory extubation within 2 hours.
That is aggressive.
Yeah,
I mean, that is high-quality care, but it is rigorous. It removes all human hesitation. You know that feeling at 3 a.m. where you look at the patient and think, maybe they passed, but let's just wait until the day team comes in.
Oh, I know it very well. The night shift stall.
The night shift stall. It's safer to do nothing than to extubate and have to reintubate an hour later. Reintubation feels like a massive failure. Leaving the tube in just feels like conservative management.
Exactly. This protocol removed the stall. If they passed, the tube came out. Period. No exceptions.
So we have the setup, we have the sticky patients, we have the contenders, the smart PAV plus versus the dumb PSV, and we have the arena, which is a strict, high-quality weaning protocol.
Now the moment of truth.
The primary outcome.
Primary outcome. Time to liberation. Who won?
Drum roll for the night shift, please. Did the smart mode win? Did PAV plus get these difficult patients off of the vent faster?
In a word, no.
Oof. Flat no.
Flat no. It wasn't even close, really. Let's look at the median time to successful liberation. In the PAV plus group, the SMART group, it was 7.3 days.
Okay, 7.3 days. And the standard PSV group?
6.8 days.
Wait, hang on. Let me run those numbers in my head. You were telling me the dumb mode was actually faster?
Technically by half a day. But statistically, it is a wash. The p-value was 0.58. The hazard ratio was 0.96. In the eyes of statistics, there is absolutely no difference. It is a null result.
That feels like a cold shower. I mean, we spent all this time talking about the sophisticated feedback loops, the compliance measurements, the bionic exoskeleton, and it didn't beat the Toyota Camry.
It did not.
Okay.
And it's important to look at the secondary outcomes to see if we missed something else.
Hmm.
Maybe they didn't get off faster, but did they stay off? We looked at ventilator-free days. Similar. We looked at reintubation rates. This is a big one. If you extubate too early, they bounce back.
What were the numbers there?
About 22 to 23% in both groups. Specifically, 22.5% for PAV plus versus 23.4% for PSV.
That is a very real-world number, by the way. A 20+% reintubation rate in a high-risk population sounds about right to me. It shows they were really pushing the limits with that protocol.
It does. Tracheostomy rates were about 20% in both groups. Mortality at 90 days was 29.6% in the PAV plus group versus 26.6% in the PSC group. Again, no statistical difference. And safety events, things like cardiac arrest or pneumothorax, were about 10% in both.
So across the board, from speed to safety to survival, the fancy mode did not outperform the standard mode.
Correct.
So we have to ask the question, why? Why did the physiologically superior mode fail to beat the standard? What is your interpretation here?
I think it comes down to what we call the protocol effect. Remember that secret weapon we talked about? The strict daily SBTs?
Right. Checklist.
When you strictly protocolize weaning, when you force daily checks, when you use T-piece trials, when you mandate extubation, the system overrides the mode.
That is a profound thought. When the system is high quality, the mode matters less.
Exactly. Think about it this way. Imagine you have two cars. One is a Formula One race car that's PAV+. The other is a Honda Civic that's PSV. Now, you put them both on a racetrack. The Formula One car should win right. It has better acceleration, better handling.
Obviously.
But now imagine you force both drivers to drive in a school zone with speed bumps every 10 feet. And you have a police officer, the protocol, standing there, making sure neither of them goes over 15 miles per hour.
The car's performance doesn't matter anymore. The Honda Civic can do 15 miles per hour just as well as a Formula One car.
That is exactly what happened here. The rigorous weaning protocol, the daily SBTs, the aggressive extubation rules, that was the speed limit. It leveled the playing field so much that the subtle physiological benefits of PAV Plus just couldn't shine through.
That makes so much sense. We tend to fetishize the technology. We want the ventilator to solve the problem for us. But the problem isn't usually the breath-by-breath mechanics. The problem is us recognizing that the patient is ready to breathe.
Spot on.
Yeah.
The bottleneck wasn't the diaphragm. The bottleneck was the decision-making process. And the protocol fixed the decision-making process for both groups.
Man, that is humbling. But okay, let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater. Even in a null trial, there are always signals in the noise. Those little moments where you see something interesting in the data. What stood out to you?
There were definitely a few breadcrumbs. The first one is the sedation signal.
Oh, I like the sound of that. What happened with the drugs?
So the study wasn't designed to test sedation as a primary outcome, but they tracked it. And they found that the PAV plus group had a significantly faster reduction in midazolam equivalent dosing.
Really?
Yeah, specifically at day 28 relative to baseline. The PAV plus group was down by about 1.51 milligrams per kilogram, while the PSV group was basically flat at plus 0.04.
That is fascinating. Let's connect the dots on the physiology there. Why would the smart vent lead to less sedation?
It goes back to that synchrony argument. If the patient is fighting the ventilator on PSV, if they are air hungry and the machine isn't giving them enough flow, what do? We sedate them. We knock them out to make them compliant with the machine. Guilty is charged. If the patient is bucking the vent at 3 a.m. and I've tried adjusting the settings and it's not working, I am ordering a bolus, I order 50 or propofol, or I turn up the drip. I chemically restrain them to make them compliant.
Exactly. But with PAV+, the machine adapts to the patient. So theoretically, the patient fights less, they have less air hunger, they feel more in control. So the nurses and the doctors feel comfortable weaning the sedation faster.
That is a huge potential benefit. Less sedation is usually always good.
Yeah.
Even if it didn't speed up extubation in this specific trial, we know that a lighter patient is generally a better patient to manage. They have better long-term cognitive outcomes.
Which leads right into the next signal, delirium.
Ah, scourge of the ICU.
The data here was a bit messy, a lot of missing values, which is typical for ICU trials, but there was a signal. The PAV plus group had fewer delirium positive days, about 23.2% positive CAM ICU days versus 26.4% in the PSV group. It's not a slam dunk, but it connects. Less fighting equals less sedation. Less sedation equals less delirium. It is a very logical chain.
It is hypothesis generating, but it's intriguing. It suggests that while PAV plus might not get you off the vent faster in a strict protocol, it might make the time on the vent more pleasant, or at least less foggy.
Pleasant might be a strong word for being intubated, but I completely get your point. Quality of life on the vent really matters.
But, and there's always a but, we have to talk about the friction. Because for all these theoretical benefits about sedation and comfort, there was a very real human cost to using the smart mode.
This is my favorite part of the paper because it validates every feeling I have ever had at 3 a.m., the ease of use data.
This is where the rubber meets the road. The study actually tracked ease of use as reported by the clinicians, the bedside nurses, and the respiratory therapists. They asked a simple question: was this easy to use today?
What was the answer?
For standard pressure support, PSV, they rated it easy to use on 92.0% of the days.
The universal remote. Everyone knows how to use it. It's muscle memory. I can set PSV with my eyes closed.
But for PAV+, they only rated it easy to use on 75.7% of the days.
That is a massive gap. That means on 1 out of every 4 days, the staff was looking at that machine thinking, this is a pain in the neck. I don't like this. This is confusing.
And we have to consider the context here. This trial was done in academic centers. These are places with resources, with research coordinators, with extensive training. If they found it hard 25% of the time, imagine what happens in a smaller community hospital on a weekend night shift with agency staff.
Or imagine it's 3 a.m. The alarm is going off. The PAV plus settings involve gain factors and elastance and compliance calculations. The PSV settings are just pressure support of 10. The cognitive load of the interface really matters when you're tired.
Exactly. The cognitive load is much higher.
And when the staff gets frustrated or confused or just tired, what do? They bail out.
And we saw that in the data too. We saw a significantly higher rate of switching to assist control mode in the PAV plus group. 58.9% of PAV plus patients were switched back to assist control, which is a full support mode at least once, compared to only 49.7% of PSV patients.
That is the 3 a.m. troubleshooting problem in action.
It really is.
Here is the scenario. Patient is on PAV+. The alarm goes off. It's beeping high peak pressure. The RT looks at it, sees a complex waveform, sees a lever rack. Gain of 60% isn't sure if the compliance calculation is accurate and just says, you know what? I am putting them back on AC volume control. I know how that works. I can fix the alarm and go check my other 6 patients.
Precisely. And that bailout has serious consequences. When you switch back to assist control, you are often increasing sedation again. You're taking the workload off the diaphragm again. You're moving backwards in the weaning process.
So the friction of the complex mode negated its physiologic benefits. The machine might have been smarter, But if the interface scares the humans operating, it fails.
It's a classic case of complexity versus consistency. In a high-stress environment like an intensive care unit, the path of least resistance usually wins. If PSV is the path of least resistance, it gets used more effectively.
The best mode is the one your respiratory therapist feels confident managing in the middle of the night. That is the ultimate takeaway for me.
I couldn't agree more. If I can't explain how it works to a tired resident in 30 seconds, it's probably too complex for widespread adoption.
Okay, let's bring this all together. We have looked at the physiology, the null result, these sedation signals, and the human friction. So what does this all mean for you, for the listener who is going into their shift tomorrow?
I think there are three main takeaways from all this data. First, culture over software.
Say that again for the people in the back.
Culture beats software. A rigorous weaning protocol, daily SBT sedation, holds T-piece trials that is harder to beat than a smart algorithm. If a unit wants to improve extubation times, fixing the process yields way more results than buying new ventilator software.
It's not about the toy. It's about the team. If you want to get patients off the vent, stop looking for a magic button and start looking at your rounding checklist. Are you screening everyone? Are you actually doing the SBT? That is where the money is.
Exactly. Stop looking for the magic button and do the work. Second takeaway, when do we use PAV+? Because this trial was null, it doesn't mean PAV+ is dead. It's safe. It showed similar safety outcomes. And it has that real sedation benefit.
Right. It's not poison. It's just not magic.
So my advice would be use it for the fighter. Use it for that specific patient who has high dyspnea, who is asynchronous, who is constantly fighting the pressure support, the patient where you were stuck between sedating them to oblivion or letting them suffer.
That makes sense. It's a tool in the toolbox. It's not the default mode for everyone, but for the patient who needs that specific kind of bionic help to get comfortable without a ton of propofol, it's a great option. Use it for comfort, not necessarily for speed.
Precisely. It is a specialized weapon. You don't use a sniper rifle to hunt deer. You use it for a very specific target. And the third takeaway, the importance of training. If you're going to use PAV plus Shirk, you cannot just turn it on and walk away. That ease of use gap proves that education is the ultimate bottleneck.
You can't just buy the Ferrari and hand the keys to someone who learned to drive on a tractor. If your RTs and nurses aren't comfortable with the gain settings, they will bail out to assist control and you've lost the benefit. You need to invest in the human capital if you want the tech capital to work.
Well said.
So final thoughts on the PROMIZING trial.
It was a null trial, but a very useful one. Sometimes negative trials are the most important ones we read. It proved that PSV is still a valid, high-quality standard of care. We don't need to feel guilty for using old tech if we are using it well.
That's a relief.
It really is. It stopped us from chasing magic bullets and refocused us on the basics. SBTs, T-pieces, and waking patients up.
It brings us back to the bedside, back to the basics. I want to close with a shout out to the respiratory therapists again. Reading this paper, seeing that ease of use data, it really highlights how much we rely on their expertise. They are the real closed-loop control systems of the ICU. They are the ones adjusting the flow, catching the asynchrony, and dealing with our 3 a.m. requests.
Absolutely. The algorithm in their brain is still better than the algorithm in the ventilator, provided we give them the support and the protocols to actually use it. So my final verdict, PAV plus is cool physiology, it's elegant, but PSV plus a good protocol. That is the champion of the night.
The champion of the night. I like that title. Well, speaking of the night, my coffee cup is empty, which is a critical alarm in itself. And I think I saw the call light go on for bed 4.
You better check that sedation hold.
Sure.
Don't let the night shift stall get you.
Never. Before we go, here is a final provocative thought for you to chew on. We spent this whole deep dive talking about how the machine measures compliance and resistance breath by breath. It is incredibly smart.
Very smart.
But if the machine is smart enough to measure all that physics, why aren't we smart enough to trust the SBT result the first time? Why do we still need a protocol to force us to pull the tube when the patient is clearly ready? Maybe the upgrade we need isn't in the ventilator. Maybe it's in our own confidence.
That is the real deep dive right there.
Thanks for listening. We will see you on the next shift.
Stay safe out there.
Thank you for spending your time with Prism Rounds. If this episode helped you think through the paper or offered something practical for the bedside, I'd be grateful if you'd like, follow/subscribe, and share it with a colleague. It's the simplest way to help this resource reach other busy clinicians and learners. I'm also trying to make the podcast better with every episode. Please leave a comment with what you found most useful. what felt unclear or too long, and what topics or papers you'd like covered next. If there's anything I can do to improve, pacing, structure, level of detail, or audio quality, I genuinely welcome the feedback. Thanks again for listening, and take care. Educational use only. This is not medical advice.